Hello, and welcome to the Dodgeball Captain's Info presentation for Spring 2020 at UTA Intramural Sports. In this presentation, we'll cover our policies, where we play, the rules of the game, our scheduling software, IMLeagues, and the league schedule, awards for our champions, upcoming events, and how to contact us. The Intramural Sports staff is comprised of the Assistant Director, Travis Langford, as well as student program assistants, student supervisors, and student officials. If you need to get in contact with us, please email us at imsports@uta.edu. Our website is uta.edu/intramuralsports. You can find links to our rules, handbook, policies and procedures, as well as other events that are going on at campus recreation. IMLeagues is our scheduling software that we'll talk about. The rules in the handbook can also be found on IMLeagues. Eligibility to play intramural sports is available to current UTA students, faculty and staff that have a MAC membership, and campus recreation membership holders. All of these are allowed to participate in intramural sports activities. Alumni must have a membership to play. All players are required to check in with the ID checker before the game. If you don't have your ID, you cannot play that night. 2 campus recreation membership holders are allowed on a team, maximum. The MAC members must show proof of membership to play. Players are not allowed to play on 2 different teams in the same division. A random eligibility check is held on the field, and a full check is held in the intramural sports office. If the game in which a player signs in is a forfeit, they're still considered to have played in that game and to be on that team's roster. Players may be added at any point in the season or postseason, so should you have problems finding players on a given night, you can still add to your roster. Game time is forfeit time, and a forfeit earns your team a 2 in sportsmanship, which we'll talk about on the next slide. If you know that your team can't make a game, you may call the intramural sports office or email imsports@uta.edu. If this is done by 3 p.m. on the day of the game, or 3 p.m. Friday for a game on the weekend, this is called a default and will carry a sportsmanship rating of 2.5. Players are not allowed to switch teams after the second week of the season, and if they do before the second week, they will have to sit out a minimum of 1 week in order to transfer between teams. Our sportsmanship system is as follows. Teams will be awarded a sportsmanship grade for each game based on their conduct. A 4.0 or an A is above and beyond conduct and sportsmanship. Good conduct and sportsmanship will be assigned a B or a 3. Average conduct and sportsmanship is a 2. Below average conduct and sportsmanship is a 1. And an F, or 0 points, is poor conduct and sportsmanship. Teams must maintain a 2.5 average in order to be eligible for playoffs. And once in the playoffs, a team must maintain that 2.5 average in order to remain in the playoffs. The way our structure works in the playoffs is that every team makes the playoffs, except for those that don't qualify because of sportsmanship or forfeit. Unsportsmanlike behavior will result in a caution, which could be penalties within the game, ejection, suspension, or a judicial hearing or dismissal from school in some of the most extreme cases. In all of our intramural sports sites, there is no smoking, no alcohol, and no tobacco products. All intramural sports participants play at their own risk. However, the Department of Campus Recreation encourages all participants to have medical insurance in case of injury. Every team makes the playoffs, except for teams that have 2 or more forfeits, or teams that default or forfeit greater than a combined 50% of their scheduled games, or any teams with less than a 2.5 sportsmanship average. If there are enough teams, there will be 2 divisions, a competitive bracket with teams that have a win-loss record above 500, and teams that have a win-loss record below 500 will go into the recreational bracket. During playoffs, the scheduling is done online, and the priority of selection has to do with the standings, the seed during the regular season. That's decided primarily by win-loss record, and a tiebreaker will be sportsmanship, and then which team has more forfeits or defaults, if they've played head-to-head, and finally our last tiebreaker is points against. Unfortunately, it is impossible to ensure that every team plays at their usual time, so be prepared to play on a date time that is not unusual. We don't reschedule games. Remember, you can still add players all the way through the championship game. Dodgeball is played at the Physical Education Building, which is adjacent to the MAC, and the upstairs courts. Teams will play 2 games per week. The day of the week depends on which division you sign up for. We will notify all players via IM Leagues if a game is canceled for any reason. We will also post on our social media sites. Please ensure that your players are on the roster before the first game. If you have any issues getting players on the roster on IM Leagues, please email imsports@uta.edu. A team will play with 6 players, 4 minimum to begin the game. Co-rec consists of a minimum of 1 of each gender and a maximum of 3 of each gender. Each match consists of 7-minute games in a best-of-3 format. A team wins when they eliminate all opposing team members, or they have more players than the opposing team left on the court when the 7 minutes expires. Overtime is when an equal number of players are on either side after 7 minutes, and untimed sudden death overtime will be played. The number of dodgeballs will be equal to the amount of players on a side. The sudden death overtime ends when 1 player is eliminated. These are the boundaries. These are commonly known as volleyball lines, but we use those for dodgeball. These are the end lines, which players will start on their backs behind. Dodgeballs will be lined up in the middle. All players from each team are on their backs, and at the whistle, the players will run to get the dodgeballs in the middle of the court. They have to bring the balls back across their end line before they can throw the ball. This player cannot throw the ball yet because that ball has not crossed the end line. Once the balls have been brought back behind the end line for the first time, teams may throw them from anywhere on the court within their half. If a ball goes outside the boundary, only 1 player per team may exit to retrieve the ball. They have to exit and return through the end line. Before leaving, they must signal to the official that they are doing so. This player must return within 15 seconds of exiting, and they must do so through the end line. While they are out getting a ball, they can still be hit and eliminated by a live thrown ball at any point. This includes while they are outside the boundaries. The division line, or half-court line, is the boundary that separates the teams. Players may not cross the half-court line when making an attempt at any other point in the game. If a player steps over the line, they're out. If they subsequently throw a ball, that ball is dead and cannot eliminate any other players. A player is eliminated when they are struck by a live thrown ball thrown by an opponent. They can be standing in any location in or out of the boundary. When they try to deflect a thrown ball and they drop the ball they're holding. When they leave the boundary area in an attempt to avoid a thrown ball. When they cross the boundary line. When they hit an opponent with the ball above the shoulders in a normal standing position. When they throw a ball and an opponent catches the ball. Or when they do not return into the boundary lines within 15 seconds of exiting to retrieve a ball. The above the shoulder rule is when a player is hit above the shoulders in a normal standing position, they're not out, the thrower is. If the player ducks, crouches, kneels, sits, dives, etc., and their head is below a normal standing position, they will still be out if hit with a thrown ball. A live ball is defined as having been thrown and not touched anything that causes it to be dead. And it is dead if it touches the floor, ground, or anything outside of the playing field. If it touches another ball, this could be loose or in player possession. So therefore, if it deflects off of a ball in a player possession and then hits a teammate, then that teammate is not out. If it touches an official, it becomes dead. If it is caught by the opponent of the throwing player, then one of their players who has been out gets to re-enter the game. The ball becomes dead if it touches a teammate of the throwing player. Or if it touches an opponent of the throwing player, for example, a thrown ball can only get 1 player out at a time. The exception is if a thrown ball touches someone and is subsequently caught by a teammate, the player originally hit by the ball may remain in the game and the thrower is out, and a player gets to re-enter. Catching a thrown ball causes the throwing player to be out and a teammate of the catching player can come back in. After each player is eliminated, they sit on their bench in order of elimination, and the chair closest to the team's end line is the first position. They will re-enter in order of being eliminated. The person in the first position may re-enter. The other players then move up. The NFL receiver rule is that any caught ball must be caught with 2 feet inside the boundary when the ball is controlled. If the player then crosses the boundary line, the player carrying the ball is also out. Teams may not stall. This is if they have all the balls on the court and they try to keep them all on their own side. They then have 5 seconds to get at least one ball to the opposing team's side. This could be thrown or rolled. If 5 seconds elapse and the team still possesses all of the dodgeballs, stalling is called and half the balls are given to the other team. If it's an odd number, they have to give up one more than half. Once a player has been hit, they must leave the field immediately without interference or distraction to either team. They may not retrieve the balls after being hit, and players on the bench may not retrieve balls. If a ball is retrieved by a player who is out, that ball is forfeited to the other team. After a player has been hit, any subsequent throws by that player will not eliminate an opponent. Any player who behaves in an unsporting way, arguing with officials, etc., can be shown a yellow card. They will sit out the remainder of that game and cannot re-enter until the beginning of next game. If a player receives a second yellow, they are ejected and their team will play down a player for the remainder of the match. If a team receives 3 yellow cards during the course of the match is forfeited and they will receive a sportsmanship score of 0. The competitive division champions will receive t-shirts, and a player has to have played in at least 2 games to be eligible for a t-shirt. If a player misses the championship game, they can come into the office to pick up their shirt up until the end of the semester. Every champion will receive a wing party at Pluckers in Arlington. They will receive 100 boneless bites per team. You have to be present to receive the boneless bites, and please take care of the waitstaff. Tip them as if you were buying the wings. You have to use the coupon before the end of the semester. Typically the Friday after graduation is your deadline. We're glad you're playing this sport with us. Please take a look at the other sports we have available. Our team sports are on the left, and the individual dual sports that we have to offer that are free are on the right. All of these can be signed up for on IM Leagues. As we said earlier, all of our rules and policies and other information can be found on our website. Give us a call at 817-272-3277 or send us an email at imsports@uta.edu. We also now have an Instagram, so follow us at UTA IM Sports and like us on Facebook.